Elon Musk stood at the podium, surrounded by dozens of cameras capturing every movement. All the attention in the room was focused on him, and he appeared completely calm. The press conference began with simple questions about the company's recent achievements. Musk responded confidently, with a slight smile, showcasing his usual charisma. "We are always working for the benefit of humanity. Our products are the future, and that future is becoming a reality today," said Elon, his voice cold yet attempting to sound friendly. No one disagreed. The attendees filmed everything, while Musk remained emotionally composed. The first questions were neutral, giving him the opportunity to display his strength and authority in the world of technology. However, over time, as he answered one question after another, Musk began to feel a certain distance in his words. His responses grew increasingly dry. He spoke about large-scale projects, huge sums of money, and investments in the future, comparing his technologies to a revolution, to humanity's greatest achievements, but this only caused mild irritation in the room. One journalist raised their hand and asked, "Elon, why are your products still only available to a select few? Why can't people with limited resources access your developments?" Musk, without changing his facial expression, replied, "That question is not entirely accurate. Innovation takes time and resources. As I've said, we are working on making sure that everyone will eventually have access to these technologies." The audience froze. Tension filled the room. This was the first moment where doubts about Musk's intentions were openly expressed. His answer was too vague, too political, and it began to irritate people. They weren't shouting yet, but the conversations grew louder. His tone remained cold and detached, and the audience started to feel that Musk was overly confident in his words, which came across as alienating. Whispers started in the room. Some people watched him with disapproval, but he continued to speak about his projects as though they were saving the entire world. The hall gradually filled up, with the audience starting to take their seats, most of whom were over 60 years old. This was an audience accustomed to simple, clear answers and not prepared to tolerate philosophical evasions or emotionally sterile comments. Elon Musk hadn't begun his speech yet, but he had already glanced at his watch a few times, feeling some internal tension, although he tried to remain calm. He had a great responsibility ahead, not just for his companies, but also for the people sitting in the hall, who were expecting something specific, not abstract concepts. The press conference began. Musk approached the podium and confidently spoke a few words about his achievements in technology and innovation. He appeared as a person accustomed to serious questions, but ones for which clear answers could be given, leaving the room satisfied. But his tone, slightly cold and detached, immediately caused discomfort among the people in the audience. The listeners with serious faces attentively listened to every word, but their eyes spoke of growing disappointment. Journalists began asking their first questions. A woman with white hair sitting in the front row raised her hand. "Elon," she said, somewhat disappointed, "your company has been releasing new technologies for several years, but where are the real results for ordinary people? How do you see the impact of your developments on pensioners who cannot afford your products? How will this affect our lives?" Musk, taking his time, looked up and answered, "We are creating innovations for all of humanity. Of course, this will have an impact, but it will not be immediate. Technologies will gradually improve people's lives, and over time they will be accessible to wider groups of the population. Everything I do is an investment in the future." The hall grew silent. The woman in the front row immediately raised her eyebrows and curiously asked, "This is interesting, but don't you think that by investing in the future, you are forgetting about us, people who need help now? Your rhetoric feels too detached, like you don't understand that we need something right now, not in the future." Musk, maintaining his composure, replied, "I understand your concerns. We are working on making technologies accessible to everyone. But the steps toward that require time." And although his words sounded logical, they didn't satisfy the woman. She asked again, Why can't you take steps faster? Doesn't it seem to you that your predictions are just pushing away people who are struggling to stay afloat right now? How can you justify this? Musk replied again. This is all part of the process. I cannot change reality faster than it allows. And innovation cannot be instant. To change the world, time is needed. We set global goals. His tone didn't change, but there was already a tendency in his answers to avoid specifics. And although his words were correct from the perspective of technological development, they didn't seem to be close to what the people in the hall truly wanted to hear. At the back of the hall, an elderly man with gray hair couldn't stand it and stood up. Elon, his voice sounded a bit weary, I've heard a lot of promises about changes you're promising for the future. But how will this affect pensions? How will you provide for older generations who won't live to see your future? Musk looked at the older man, as if understanding the importance of this question. But his answer was brief and very general. We are working on creating new opportunities for people of all age groups. It takes time, but these technologies will definitely benefit everyone. But the answer didn't convince the man, who sighed tiredly and sat down, making a small gesture that indicated his dissatisfaction. The hall began to fill with discontent. Musk could feel the atmosphere growing more tense, but he decided not to change his strategy. He continued to keep his focus on the big goals. Older journalists couldn't leave the questions unanswered and kept pressing. One woman, seemingly losing her patience, asked, "Excuse me, but you're not answering the question at all. We want to understand how your decisions affect us right now, not in decades. Doesn't it seem to you that your innovations are only for the rich, not for those who actually need help?" Musk seemed prepared for this reaction and replied with cold calm. My goal is not to satisfy short-term needs. I see global opportunities for humanity and am trying to realize them. But these answers didn't satisfy the audience, and they began to lose their patience, their faces becoming more nervous. And although Musk still appeared calm and confident, his style left the impression that he didn't fully understand the people in the hall. And so, after a few minutes, as each answer became less specific and the questions more persistent, the hall began to show the first signs of true discontent. Elon Musk, still maintaining his calm, carefully observed the audience's reactions. With every new question, the atmosphere grew more tense. The older people in the audience began to glance at each other, sensing how irritation was starting to build. They had come to this press conference hoping for specific answers to issues concerning their present lives, not far-sighted theories that seemed abstract and disconnected from reality. At one point, a man with glasses and wrinkles on his face raised his hand from the back row. He had been sitting silently for several minutes, watching the dialogue unfold. Elon, he said loudly, his voice deep and filled with disappointment, you said you're working on creating technologies that will benefit everyone. But for us, retirees, it doesn't matter if these technologies are not accessible to us. How do you plan to change things for those of us who don't have the resources to access such innovations? Elon tilted his head again and responded in almost the same tone as before. We're working on making technologies more accessible. But this is a process, and it will take time. We understand your situation, and we're doing everything we can to help everyone. The man frowned. It seemed his question hadn't been fully addressed. Understood, he said, but his voice became more mocking. Yes, you're doing everything you can. But what do we do now? We can't wait for a few more years for you to help. We have real needs right now, and you're talking about some distant prospects. These words seemed to signal something to the others. The room began to stir. People, who had been sitting with expressions of disappointment for a few minutes, could no longer stay quiet and began raising their hands one by one. A younger woman in the middle of the room asked, "And if we want help right now, where is it? Doesn't it seem to you that your innovations are more focused on the future, but not on those who already need change now?" Elon, noticing more and more irritation among the audience, responded without changing his tone. We're working on making sure that in the future, everyone can benefit from technologies that will make their lives easier. Technology is the best way to ensure progress. These answers started to sound like empty phrases. Journalists began to shift, exchanging nervous glances. At the back of the room, where several retirees were seated, people started discussing what Elon had just said. The sense of dissatisfaction became increasingly apparent. One man, with relatively gray hair, remarked, "These are just empty words. How can he be so indifferent to our present lives? We can't wait for the future he's promising. We want answers for now." After these words, a few loud expressions of outrage could be heard in the room. The line between calm and open anger was becoming thinner and thinner. Musk noticeably clenched his jaw but didn't seem ready to change his approach. He returned to the microphone and, almost unaware of the tension, continued. "I understand that it's important for you to get answers now, but you must understand that there are many factors in reality that need to be considered. We're moving forward, and this applies to everyone. In the end, everyone will benefit." The journalists could no longer stay within the usual professional tone. One, younger in age, began to ask more persistently. "Elon, we hear you, but where are the specific steps? What technologies will help pensioners now? How will they access what you promise? If you can't answer these questions, what are we supposed to believe in these big plans?" The questions were becoming more critical, and people in the audience started to raise their voices involuntarily. Musk was forced to pause and think. But, as always, he stuck to his line, not providing specifics. "You want specifics, but these questions need time to be discussed," he replied. "I suggest you leave these questions for other meetings. I'm here to talk about our achievements and future plans." The irritation in the room reached its peak. The audience began to fervently discuss his words, exchanging thoughts on why Musk's answers still didn't solve the real issues. Several people had already begun to say that the entire conference had turned into nothing but empty promises. The tension in the room was increasing with every passing minute. People began openly expressing their frustration. A few older women, sitting in the front rows, whispered among themselves, casting glances at Elon Musk, who stood behind a microphone, maintaining a seemingly emotionless demeanor as if everything was going according to plan. But with every new question, the reaction became more and more overt. A man in a blue suit in the back row raised his hand and asked, almost unable to hide his anger, "Listen, Elon, we're not asking about your space dreams and the future on Mars. We're asking about what you're doing right now for the people who are already here. How is it possible that we live in such a country, and you have technologies that still can't help regular people who can't afford to buy your future products?" These words became the final push for others. Elon could no longer maintain his calm. He tried to respond, but the answer he gave sounded like another devaluation of their concerns. Technologies can truly change people's lives, but for that to happen, it takes time. You must understand that all of this doesn't develop overnight. An older woman in the middle of the room interrupted him, her voice trembling with emotion. "Elon, we understand everything, but we're not interested in what will happen in 10 years, we want to know what's going to happen now. You talk about the future, but we may not even live to see it. So tell us, what are you doing now that can help us? What real help is there?" The crowd began to speak even louder. One by one, hands went up with increasingly categorical questions. The feeling that this meeting had turned into a circus show took over the room. Elon Musk tried once again to take on the role of a calm leader, but this time it didn't work. He paused, seemingly searching for words that could save him again. But after a few seconds of silence, his answer was once again vague. "I understand your desire to see real changes. However, every great breakthrough takes time. Technologies develop gradually. We all want to make this happen faster, but it requires resources and cooperation. At this, someone from the audience shouted, "Is that your only answer? Just resources and cooperation? You're telling us you can't find any simple solutions for us, right here, right now, when we're here and need help?" Elon looked at him with clear disappointment. Even more questions began to ring out, but they became less organized, more chaotic. The audience was on the verge of exploding. The journalists also felt that the situation was getting out of hand. One of the younger ones leaned forward and said, "Elon, let's clarify. You talk about big future projects, but right here, right now, we have real people with real problems. What are your specific steps to make them see changes now? How will your projects help those who don't have access to the latest technologies and can't afford expensive solutions?" Elon Musk paused for a few seconds. His face didn't change, but it seemed like he no longer had a ready answer. For a moment, it looked like his own words and technological ideas were beginning to weigh on him. But once again, his characteristic calm tone returned. "We are focused on creating technologies that will ultimately change the economy and ensure access to resources for everyone. These changes won't happen overnight, but they will definitely happen." And it was clear now that people weren't satisfied anymore. One of the pensioners, an old man with white hair, couldn't take it anymore. "These changes won't reach us. We don't want to hear any more about these fantastic ideas. Why can't you give a simple answer to a simple question? When will these changes happen for us?" At that moment, the atmosphere in the room began to resemble a raging fire. People, unable to hold back, started shouting from all corners of the room, demanding concrete actions, not empty words about the future. It seemed that Elon Musk was struggling to stay calm. He stood there on stage, surrounded by the angry glares of senior journalists and citizens who had come to the meeting. They were no longer listening to him, they were no longer willing to tolerate his promises of a distant future that he described. Their hearts were disappointed, and their minds were filled with anger. The man in the front row, who had previously asked why none of his technologies were helping ordinary people, raised his hand again. This time, his voice sounded not just disappointed but openly hostile. "That's it," he exclaimed. "You're feeding us promises, but it's not helping us here and now. We don't need your space travel or incredible technologies. We want to understand why our children can't find jobs, why prices are rising, and you still can't offer anything real. All these revolutionary ideas won't pay our bills or improve our lives today." These words became the final push. It was clear that the audience no longer believed in empty promises. They began shouting different grievances, and someone even started clapping sarcastically, as if mocking Musk himself. Elon Musk remained calm, but even his face now showed how hard it was for him to maintain his composure. At times, it seemed like he was trying to come up with a response, but each attempt only worsened the situation. Suddenly, in the midst of this chaos, an elderly woman stood up and shouted, trying to outshout the noise. "You don't understand. People our age don't see a future anymore. We have our problems today, and you can't just wave them away by saying it takes time. We are still here, and we have a right to this life. Not just your promises about something that will happen someday." There was silence in the hall as Elon Musk finally spoke words that no one expected to hear. "I understand that this is hard, but what I'm doing is for future generations. And I sincerely believe this will change everything." Those few words became the final test of the patience of the audience. They couldn't take it anymore. Shouting, exclamations, frustration, all of this filled the room at once. People began standing up from their seats, talking, and then, literally raising a ruckus that consumed everything. The enraged crowd did not allow Elon to continue. The elderly people who had come to the meeting with hopes for answers realized, today, they would get none. The hall was filled with chaos. Elon Musk tried to maintain control, but it was already clear that this was the point of no return. The thunder of anger was inevitable. The story ended not with words but with anger and a clear sense of alienation. Elon was unable to connect with those who were ready to believe in promises but demanded concrete results right now. Part 6. After the storm. After Musk left the stage, the atmosphere in the hall remained tense, but quiet. People slowly began to disperse, quietly discussing the events among themselves, some leaving without a word, disappointed, their eyes cold. Throughout the entire meeting, they had not received answers to the questions that mattered most to them. Elon Musk still hadn't found the connection with the audience that they so desperately needed. Meanwhile, discussions in the world were just beginning. And although he was known for his determination and perseverance, this situation became a tough lesson for him. Not all problems can be solved with grand ideas. Sometimes, a concrete approach is needed to help those who need it most right now.